When I was young, when I was a young lad, I loved baseball. One reason for that was that I had a grandmother, my grandmother Steele, who was a Pittsburgh Pirate fanatic and listened to all the games or watched what she could on television and kept a scorecard for every game and taught me to do that and to love the game and follow it. Another reason was that when I was growing up in the small town I was growing up in, baseball was pretty much the only game in town. Now kids have all kinds of opportunities for sports, but really the only organized sport for elementary school age kids, and for boys then, was baseball. And football and basketball didn't come till later. So everyone played baseball, and I loved playing baseball. When I started playing, I had this little small baseball glove, which was probably about the size of my hand now. And it was a family glove. It had been handed down. My father had had it, my uncle had had it, and I'm sure others had used it. And it was the glove that I learned to play on. It was just this little thing. When I grew a little bit, finally, my dad took me out and bought me a new baseball glove, a real adult glove, which was too big for my hand, but it was my glove. It was a Bill Mazeroski glove, which that name may not mean anything to you, but he was a Pittsburgh Pirate great. And it was right there on the glove, and I wanted to play like Bill Mazeroski. It was awesome to have my own baseball glove. Until one day, when I came inside and I left it outside, and it rained. And my dad came home from work, and I heard, "Jay Hunter." Hunter's my middle name. I never liked my middle name when I was growing up because the only time I ever heard it was when I was in trouble. And I came from wherever I was, and there he was holding up this wet glove. And he said, "I guess you were not ready for this responsibility. You'll have to use your old glove." And he took it away from me. And my new glove disappeared, and boy, was that humiliating. Having to go from that adult glove back to that little kid glove again and go back out playing with my friends with that little glove. Until sometime later, when he gave it back to me again, and I'm sure partly it was just a matter of letting it dry out, and he oiled it up again and gave it to me. And I can tell you that I never, ever left that glove outside again. I took care of it. It was my first introduction to the concept of stewardship. And the difference, the subtle but important difference between the idea of stewardship and the idea of ownership. I thought I owned my glove. It was mine. He gave it to me as a gift. And this was true. But it was more true and accurate to say that I had been given a stewardship of a gift. Because the gift came with a blessing and an opportunity to use it, to learn to use it, to enjoy it, to do whatever I wanted with it, as long as I took care of it. To care for the gift, so that it would be there for a long time, and so that maybe it could become a family gift in the future for someone else. Stewardship is a wonderful and powerful word and idea. And I don't want to get rid of it. I don't think we talk about stewardship nearly enough. I don't think we think about what it means in all aspects of life nearly enough. In every religious tradition that I know anything about, there are stories and teachings that tell us all that all we have, everything we have, our lives, the land we live in, our children, our relationships, our time, our talent, our money, All of it is a gift from God. And that we have been entrusted with gifts. That we are privileged to enjoy and benefit from those gifts, but that we also have responsibilities to care for those gifts and to use them well. I mean, that's what I think most of us, what most of us, if we have children, we try to teach our children. We may not use the word, but we want them to understand what it means. I think of a funny Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that ran years ago, where Calvin was given a brand new bicycle. And for days, the strip, he was out there on the bicycle using his imagination to be a superhero and all the things that Calvin did. And then one day, his dad came home and looked around and went to Calvin and said, "Where's the bicycle?" And Calvin said, "I sold it." And his dad's pulling his hair out. And he says, "We have to go get that bike back." And then he had to explain to him that although he had given Calvin the gift of the bicycle, it was not truly his to do anything he wanted to, but that he was the caretaker of that bicycle. And he had to get it back so Calvin can continue to use it. The biblical story begins with the creation story, which we are all familiar with, I think, which sets humans in the midst of the creation as the ones who the Bible says are created in the image of God. And that doesn't mean that every other creation isn't a part also of the image of God. It is. But it means that of all that there is in our creation, the humans, we, are the ones who have the wisdom and the ability to reflect and to think ahead, to have foresight, and to imagine the future, and have been given the ability to act proactively on behalf of ourselves and every other living thing on earth. And for that reason, we have been entrusted as stewards of the earth. I mean, that's the first story in the Bible that involves human, is that we have been set here and given the task of taking care of the earth. And that story pops up in every other religious tradition in some way or another. There's a Native American proverb that says, "Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children." We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Which means that we have been entrusted with caring for this earth so that we can give it to our children and their children and generations in the future in as good as or better shape than when we were here. That's what it means to be a steward. This is one of the fundamental tenets of stewardship and why it's such a powerful concept, that we've been given something and the ability to think into the future and to imagine that someday someone else is going to have what we have. I mean, just think of where you live and who has lived there before and who's going to live there in the future, and what it means to be given that, not as something that's mine to do with whatever I want, but as a stewardship. That we have this little piece of land, if we have a piece of land, that we are given the opportunity to take care of, so that we can benefit from it and use it and enjoy it, but then it's going to go to somebody else in the future. And our task, our calling, is to take care of it for generation after generation after generation. That's stewardship. We tend, though, not to think in those terms. We tend to think in terms of ownership. It's mine. I own it, I earned it, it's my property, it's my house, it's my stuff. It's my time, it's my money, it's my life, and therefore I can do whatever I want with it. Behind that mentality, to me, I think, lies much that is wrong with our world. I mean, we want with our land without consequences, without thinking about consequences, and that's why we have a dead river in the Minnesota River, and that's why we have a big dead zone down in the Gulf of Mexico, just as obvious examples, because we don't think about the consequences of what we are doing, and where we are not paying ourselves for the consequences we are creating downriver, downstream. It's ours. We can do it with what we want, and we're not thinking about the impact that it has on the lives of what lives in the river, what lives in the Gulf, and the other people who live down there and who try to make their living and can't anymore because we've killed the Gulf. And that's a failure of stewardship. Or the idea that we worked hard for what we have and we don't want anyone else to tell us what to do with it because we earned it ourselves and no one else. We pulled ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We hear a lot of that these days. In one of his finer moments, before he was running for president, Mitt Romney once gave a speech in which he said that 95% of his success was attributed to being born in America. Think about that. He said 95% of his success was attributed to being born in America, which was his way of acknowledging in this honest moment that just the fact of where he was born was an incredible gift, that much of the world doesn't even have that opportunity, is born into very different circumstances. And that gave him a huge advantage over people around the world. And most of us, obviously, are not born into the wealth of someone like Mitt Romney. But whatever we have, we live in a land of wealth and opportunity that much of the world can only dream of. And it's a great gift. It's an incredible gift. And it's a privilege, but it's also a responsibility to use our gift well for the good of ourselves and for the good of others. And this is to me is the mentality of stewardship, of being entrusted with a certain amount of time in our lives, with personal gifts that we have and that we can develop and share with others, with resources to take care of our responsibilities well, but also to have a sense of shared responsibility where we are also invited and called and feel the need to share our resources, our time, our talent with others because of the good fortune that we live in.